Hey, this is Sandy.
And Randy.
And we're here on AT Corner.
Being an athlete trainer comes with ups and downs, and we're here to showcase it all.
Join us as we share our world in sports medicine.
Welcome back to another episode of AT Corner. Happy last week of National Athletic Training Month.
And boy, do we have something so exciting in store for you guys today.
Yes, we have Chad Starkey talking about epidemiology.
So fun fact, Chad actually did not know what we were going to talk about before we just jumped into this episode. He actually said, hey, it's more authentic if we just go. I could talk about anything. Which if that shows you just a little piece of how awesome, inspiring, amazing this man is.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. So Chad Starkey is a professor and the chair of Department of Athletic Training at Ohio University. He also serves as the director of Ohio University's online DAT program and their MSAT program.
Which the DAT program is where we had the luxury of meeting Chad. And that's actually also where we, the two of us, have taken a class from Chad about epidemiology and injury risk, injury rates, and all that.
Chad is a graduate of West Virginia University. He received his master's and doctoral degrees from Ohio University. He has served as a commissioner for the Commission of Accreditation of Athletic Training Education, on the board of directors for the Board of Certification, and as chair of the Education Council of the National Athletic Trainers Association. From 1986 through 2018, he provided epidemiological services to the NBA, and he has authored several textbooks focused on sports medicine, orthopedic diagnosis, and therapeutic modalities, which, by the way, I'm pretty sure we all have at least one of those textbooks.
Yes.
And he's served as a co-editor for 4 editions of Taber's Cyclopedic Medical Dictionary.
Yeah, honestly, epidemiology is kind of a scary word, I feel like, if you don't know. Like, it's a big, scary word if you don't really know anything about it.
For sure.
But hopefully after you listen to this and you listen to Chad, hopefully it's a little bit less scary, and especially after you realize how much data we have as athletic trainers, even through everyday documentation.
Yeah.
You ready to get this started, Randy?
Let's do it. All right, so we figured, Chad, you'd probably really love to start off with some cryo breakers. We figured that would be right up your alley. So one of our first ones that we got for you is, what is your athletic training muse? This is a modality, rehab, tool, tape, braces, etc. Any tool of the trade that represents you.
All of those are really bad icons for our profession. If I were to have a muse, it would be probably a computer,
Okay,
or a brain.
That seriously is perfect for you and perfect for what we're going to talk about.
Well, but I mean, I don't know what I'm going to what we're going to talk about, but it's usually based on the shortage of athletic trainers or the lack of staffing. We tend to go into this autopilot cookbook, treat everybody this without sitting down and problem solving each patient that we see.
yeah, I hear you. I think, yeah, when you get really busy, it's hard to. Sometimes it's easier to fall back on, I've done this before, we'll keep doing that. I do have to say, I think brain is probably the first time we've had that one. Yeah.
It's the foundation.
Well, you can teach an 8-year-old to tape an ankle, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's very true.
We way overuse ice.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
Well, if you haven't guessed already, we are talking about epidemiology. So if you can give us a story, experience, case study, something that you would like to start us off with about epidemiology and athletic trainers.
Sure. I excuse me, I just hit puberty. 9:09 Eastern Daylight Time. I need to mark it in my calendar. When we talk about sports epidemiology, it's really a dumbing down or almost a bastardization of what I shouldn't, what public health epidemiologists do. We all remember the pandemic and all the epidemiologists and trying to find that bat that started everything. Um, we use some of those principles to again make informed decisions regarding patient care. It can also be extended to resource allocation, and in this case, resources are your staff, how and where are you going to spend your time based on the implied risk of the event.
What are some things that, like, within that kind of realm of epidemiology that the athletic trainer would be looking at? So you already kind of talked about like possibly injury risk. What are some other elements of that ATs could use or could calculate?
Well, ideally, an EMR should be able to calculate all this for you. Most of them don't, but boy, it would be really great if you could push a button and see a change in your injury rates over time, to identify differences between any two groups, be it sports or positions within a sport.
Mm-hmm.
Again, those types of data points will help people make better database decisions.
Chad, if you had a perfect EMR, what would you have it track?
I am going to stand up.
And we got the theme of this one right here.
Yeah, it's funny how over time, history kind of forgets, and most of the people watching this podcast will have no idea what that means.
Let Alfie help.
And then let me turn it around like that.
Sports systems, sports medicine software.
When back in 1983, this thing was developed called the personal computer.
Mm-hmm.
I took out a student loan to buy an IBM PC just because I'm a nerd and I like that kind of stuff. I taught myself how to program.
Nice.
And I built this really bad injury reporting system.
Uh-huh.
Medical records package. I sent it to a friend of mine who actually was an orthopedic surgeon. And the thing about it was it said body part, then you had to go to a book and type in a code.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, "That's the stupidest thing I've ever seen in my life. Why do you have it here and then in a book?" I may or may not have been at a local establishment, and I may or may not have been playing Pac-Man. And I'm dead serious. I'm playing Pac-Man, and I'm using this thing to move Pac-Man around the board. And then it dawned on me that if I listed the body parts on the screen and used the cursor to track them down, that gets rid of the book.
Mm.
So that became a software package named Alfie. Where did the name Alfie come from? An Elvis Costello song.
Nice. Oh, there you go.
It was the first commercially successful sports medicine medical records package. I was running it out of my basement. I'd be laying on the couch watching the Flintstones, take a call, and make a big chunk of change there. Kramer Products ended up buying the rights to it. But in that, it would give you you hit a report section and it would give you, pie charts of, okay, this is your injury distribution by whatever your dependent variable is. And that in turn led me to working with the NBA to standardize and consolidate their medical records.
Mm-hmm.
So, to do the very stuff that you all learned in class.
Wow, that's really cool, Chad.
I'm old.
So Alfie is not around anymore?
No. I don't know what happened with Kramer Products. It was probably around for 10 or 12 years.
Oh, wow, that's pretty cool.
I do remember, you all probably aren't old enough to remember this, but when the 2000s came, there was the Y2K bug.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it did kind of get bitten by the fact that, I didn't think people would be using this for another 17 years. So some of the fields wouldn't take the 2000 data, but that was on them, not me.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's cool.
So what sorts of fields are in there? When we're looking at epidemiology, are we just looking at body parts? Are we just looking at athletes, sports? Like what would you recommend for athletic trainers to look at?
It all depends on your question. It kind of like a modality, one question doesn't fit all circumstances. If you want to know, okay, I've got a staff of 3, I've got 72 sports. Let's take a look at the rate of injuries during practice.
Mm-hmm.
If the injury rate for tennis is 0.0001, you probably don't need to have someone sitting right there at practice.
Yeah.
So, again, it goes back to that human resource allocation that we discussed right at the beginning. If your goal is to reduce injuries, you can look at, we'll use football as an example. You're finding that your defensive linemen are really having a lot of shoulder problems. Is it technique? Is it strength and conditioning, or the lack thereof? So you identify the problem and then you use some method to correct it.
You discussed a little bit about rate and risk. Could you define the differences between injury rate and injury risk?
Sure. Risk is a probability of an event happening that goes from 0 to 1. Or if you multiply that by 100, 0 to 100, and obviously the closer to 1, the more probable it is. And risk is just simply the odds of an event happening. So you can do it by player, you can do it by team. And if one player gets hurt once, when you do your risk calculation, that would be the same as the person getting injured 5 times. Just, were you hurt? Yes, no. Rate is more time or exposure based, and that gives you the want to use the word prevalence, which isn't completely appropriate, is how frequently you would expect something to happen.
So for calculating like injury rate, injury risk, and kind of using that data, how savvy do you have to be like with the computer to do this? Is this going to take a lot of like you got to know the innards of Excel, or is this something you can kind of pick up pretty quickly?
Um, in the class you all had, I believe one of the first slides was a plus sign, a minus sign, a division sign, and a multiplication sign. If you know how to do those four functions, you're 90% of the way to most of the things that you need to know.
For sure. That's awesome. That's really cool.
So when you're using this data to bring to administrators, how would you put that in a way that makes it digestible for them?
Pictures.
Okay.
I mean, if you're looking through an article, or if you're looking at something on the web, and there's all of these words, but there's a graph that explains it, which one are you going to be more drawn to, and which one is going to leave more of a lasting impact on you?
For sure.
Definitely the pictures.
Yeah. How far is your drive from home to your work?
10 minutes.
Oh, for some of us, it's 30 to an hour.
Okay, so in your 10 minutes or your 30 to an hour, how many billboards do you go past?
A ton.
Yeah, Randy gets a ton.
Tell me one of them.
Well, I see a lot of injury attorney billboards and accident attorney billboards on the way to work. Next
time you drive into work, and don't become overly distracted doing this, it is really, really rare to see a billboard that has more than 7 words on it.
Oh, I'm all in now. I want to see this. I mean, I could believe that for sure.
And it's a combination. It's usually the visual that draws your attention to it, and then the few words put all that into context. So your injury attorney lawyers probably have a big old cigar there in their mouth.
Yes, for sure. It is. You know what? It is usually a picture of themselves.
There's one with a dog.
There is the one with the dog. That's right.
The dog is an attorney?
It's a very smart dog.
Maybe a partner.
It's a mascot.
Junior associate, maybe. So, you kind of alluded to this as far as just kind of like the EMR component, but like kind of what's the easiest way to start collecting this data? Like sometimes when you hear like calculating injury risk, injury rate, it seems like there might be a lot of work to it. So what's kind of just the easy way to just get going?
A lot of it is going to be dependent on which EMR you use, and what fields those EMRs collect. The other thing that some EMRs will do this, others don't. You'll need a way to calculate exposures. Days is the easiest way to do that, but when I was doing this stuff with the NBA, I had the luxury of being able to say, "Oh, Sandra Harris played 732 minutes so far." Well, there's your denominator, and it's a very precise denominator. The more general you get, the less applicable
Mm-hmm.
your outcomes are.
So for a sport like basketball, it's a lot easier to calculate the number of minutes that someone's playing. But for a sport more like football or soccer, you don't really have that data as readily available. How would you go about finding exposures in
Uh,
those sports?
in that case, you would use appearances in the game.
Mm.
Now, the problem with doing that is if you two are on a soccer team, you both appear in a game. That's two exposures, one each.
Right.
But if Randy plays 30 seconds and Sandra plays, I don't know how long a soccer match is, but we'll say 45 minutes, you know, they both count as an exposure, but
Mm-hmm.
one exposure is like that, and the other one's so. And that's kind of the problem with using larger chunks for your epic.
Have you ever taken this data to a coach and made any changes?
No, but when I was doing this, remember I was working with the athletic trainers in the league office, so we did use data for decision making purposes.
Wow, that's really cool. Especially at that level of sport. Like, that's really awesome.
But now, and the reason why I haven't is almost my whole career has been here in geekdom. Uh, but I have helped it's our athletic training staff do this in class. I try to help you know how to put this stuff together so you can use it.
For sure. Another thing that I was kind of thinking of is I've seen a lot of epidemiological studies on just kind of looking at like injury rates across like I've seen some from like NCAA that have looked at cross country injuries over like the last 10 years. If you're in a place that like, hey, maybe you just don't have the time to necessarily collect as much of like that exposure data, is it possible to use those epidemiological studies to help kind of decision making, or do you need it still a little more personalized?
You can use large scale epidemiological studies to make inferences. And in your case, if you using cross country, if that 10-year study said, well, here's the average uh, rate of injury in cross country, and you're way up here, that gives you a metric
Yeah,
to say, at least identify that a problem exists.
for sure.
No, that brings up a really good point because from even from my football season last year to this year's season, we had drastically different injury rates. Even in position group, it was significantly more the second season. And obviously, there were a lot of factors that went into that. But looking into what a normal injury rate is for some of these athletes, looking at the first season, it was not really that the second season was so much more injury prone. It was really that our first year, I mean, we were also undefeated, and we were the it really does make a difference when you are the bigger football players. And so we really had a low injury rate the first year.
We started out talking about the big picture of epidemiology and what you see in the movies and on TV and stuff, finding patient zero and figuring out how something spreads in trans. Well, the with orthopedic injuries, they obviously are not communicable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Ultimately, that boils down to bad luck.
Yeah.
Someone goes in for a layup comes down and they have their leg just a little bit out of position, puts it in a vulnerable spot, there goes the ACL. So one of the things that we need to accept, and really one of the primary reasons why we exist as a profession, is that when you have 2,300-pound people running into each other, eventually an injury is going to happen.
For sure.
And there are certainly the freak injuries that happen. There's somebody sitting on the bench and gets hit by a foul ball in the head and suffers a concussion. Bad things unfortunately do happen, and we could not prevent every injury.
Definitely not.
For sure. Now when I look at my injury stats, all I'm going to see is a stat sheet of bad luck. That's the first thing that's going to pop in my head now.
Oh, the whole concept of being injury prone.
Yes.
I can't remember it right now, but somebody did a really nice research article that does show that some people just genetically are at an increased risk of injury.
Wow, that is really fascinating.
Yeah.
When genetics always is a really big influence, especially with ACL injuries.
I was just thinking that.
And this was an internal study that was done. We didn't publish it, but we went through. We probably had almost 20 years of data at this point, and I went through and I identified every set of biological brothers that played in the NBA.
Mm-hmm.
And in every case, if one of the siblings tore an ACL, the other one did.
Wow,
that's interesting.
And if one sibling did not rupture an ACL, the other one didn't. So now that only includes at the professional level. I didn't go back and look at high school or college, but it was still really an intriguing fact. And I'll ask my students in the classroom, how many people here have ruptured an ACL? Depending on how active the class is, hands will go up, and then I'll say, okay, of those that did, who of you have had a sibling rupture an ACL? And not everybody's hand stays up, but it's like, oh yeah.
That's interesting. I feel like this was quite a few years ago now, but like I think it was like a session at NATA or something. They were talking about certain genes and like a certain upregulation, downregulation of genes kind of led to or kind of hinted at possibly being an increased risk of ACL tear. So yeah, I have heard of that for sure.
Well, just recently, one of my athletes tore their ACL, and I said, "Hey, it was I believe it was their right leg." So I was like, "Well, you're not going to be able to drive." So I was like, "Hey, do you have can you call your parent to pick you up?" And they're like, "Actually, my parents on the way to take my brother to ACL surgery right now."
It boils down to you get to say, "Thanks, Mom and Dad."
I was like, "You guys get to do rehab together."
Yeah. The brothers that rehab together stay together. So, we've kind of hinted at this again, just kind of like the class that you do teach on this. And, we've been like very lucky to actually take this class, but kind of where can someone kind of learn more about epidemiology if they're not able to like take a class?
What I would recommend is getting on the Google and not to discriminate. If you're a Bing person, um, and search Zach Kerr, Kerr, who is at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. He's not an athletic trainer, but he is without a doubt the most active sports epidemiologist out there now. Has provided so much information to the athletic training profession regarding sports epidemiology. He works with Datalist, who does the NCAA and the high school study, does all their statistical analysis.
You know, it's really cool to see this all come together because, as we've talked about before, as an athletic trainer and in our profession, we do collect so much data, but it's really what do we do with that rather than it just sitting in a computer or a software somewhere? How can we actually utilize that to show our value, to help decrease injury risk, to et cetera, et cetera?
And again, this is probably a workload issue, but athletic trainers aren't always the best at maintaining good records. And I think that if you take an athletic trainer that works in the private for-profit setting versus you all, there's not only the demand, the expectation that those clinic-based people document everything that they do. Be it diagnostics or intervention, but that shows the work, that shows what people are getting out of it. We don't do quite as good of a job in the quote unquote traditional setting as we should. And anytime you generalize like that, you're generally wrong. But I think it's an area that I think everybody can improve in.
For sure, yeah. And that's what I kind of tell my students, like when I'm kind of teaching them the concepts of epidemiology and kind of calculating injury rate, is just this, like, we as athletic trainers are exposed to so many opportunities to collect data, and if you're documenting, like, your EMR has like just a ton of data that is definitely usable if you have the time to do so.
And some you have to pull out manually, and some of them, depending on what EMR you use, like you can create those reports like you were talking about. And definitely depends on your question.
AI can be used for good or evil. I'm working on the evil part. But I can see in the very near future, you tell your computer, Sandra Harris, right, ACL rupture, blah, blah, blah. It'll sort all that, put it into the EMR for you, and then using our data, calculate the rate of ACL injuries. Okay, now calculate that rate, male versus female, or football versus basketball. So the good aspect of AI are those type of things that will make the use of our time more effective. You don't have to sit there and figure it out yourself.
I was going to say, man, that would cut down so much time for me. That'd be fantastic.
Only if you use it for evil.
I
think that kind of leads into, if time's a little tight, how can you analyze the data either with AI, without AI, if you're Like, do we just need to focus on the time to document, or what advice do you have for athletic trainers who, you're right, the workload is just
It could
that
be a lot,
much?
yeah.
Well, first of all, we have the legal obligation
Mm-hmm.
to document this anyway. So
Absolutely.
that needs to be where your emphasis is.
Mm-hmm.
It shouldn't be that challenging time wise to, again, if your EMR is set up for it or you download it into Excel, to go through it and make those calculations.
For sure.
Now, some of these, the numbers become a little bit unstable if your N is less than 30. So are we really limited by that, or how do you recommend if you have like a smaller?
The low N is most usually affects confidence intervals. So if you have something with a low N, you could use the odds ratio
Mm-hmm.
or relative risk calculations.
Nice.
You ready for an action item?
Yes, I think it's time for, this is Sandra's favorite part because she's all about action and what can we do right now. So what can an AT do today that can change their practice?
An athletic trainer's listening on their way to work right now. They're going to go into their office and they're going to change something today.
Well, first of all, I hope they have a nice day. Keep things in perspective. The one thing you've heard the expression garbage in, garbage out. The more accurate what you document, both in terms of detail and being sure that you capture everything, gives you that foundation of data that you could use to withdraw later on.
For sure, I like that. That's what I try to tell my students. Like whatever you're getting out of your like EMR or whatever data you're trying to look up is only as good as what's being put in. So, that should kind of be like your kind of expectation of like, if you've put in a lot into your EMR and a lot into that kind of data usage, like you should be able to get a lot out of it. Or if you've only put kind of limited, like it might kind of limit what you're able to actually pull out of it.
And the other thing we spoke about is, okay, if when you identify the body part, if you go leg, that's by the end of the season, you're going to have a whole lot of legs. And as a matter of fact, I bet you have twice as many legs as you have people.
Uh-huh.
And then if you go leg, knee, you're going to take the end from here down to here. And then you go knee. We'll show the PCL some love here. Knee PCL.
Mm-hmm.
So once you start, if you drill down too deep, you're not going to get that end to make the really rational conclusion from it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
A lot of this is just the eyeball test too. If your men's team has one ACL rupture over the last 5 years, and your women's team has 22, you don't need to take a class to figure out that's not right.
Yeah, that that's a good way of
say in Eastern Ohio, that ain't right.
That's a good way of putting it for sure. There are times you could kind of just look at it and just be like, something weird's going on.
Yeah. And then you can take that something weird and build it into a more scientific hypothesis.
For sure.
But it takes the weirdo factor to kind of trigger that.
Yeah, that's true. And look at that. Science started by weird.
Weird science.
Yeah, see, there we go.
You go.
Finally, a movie reference somebody gets.
honestly, also talking about just streamlining, because you kind of brought it up. If you just put something in the notes of your EMR, right, it's going to be a lot more difficult to pull out later.
Oh, yeah.
But if you use like your drop down features, or we created a sign in on an iPad that goes directly to an Excel file. So then we can take that data and do whatever we want with that. And we can sort it by sport or whatever, or I can use that to then put into my EMR. So really, if you find a system that works for you and you're streamlining, it's going to be a lot easier than looking in like every soap note you've written, like clicking the person's name, clicking open, clicking notes, clicking and then reading through and trying to find some piece of data. If you streamline the process, it's going to be a lot easier on you on the back end to find the time to do all these things.
Yes.
Hey, one day AI.
Yeah, and again, that would be the perfect example. Okay, take these soap notes, identify the body parts, identify the interventions.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Our university has some pretty harsh policies on use of AI. I encourage our students to use it.
I think that's one thing that I've kind of noticed is I feel like people should at least get comfortable of using it as a tool to kind of help,
And I tell them, when I was a kid, there was a device that was invented that was going to destroy humanity as we knew it. That was called the calculator. People are going to have calculators and they're not going to know how to do math. Well, no, having the calculator just makes the application of math easier. Mm-hmm. You don't have to remember your multiplication tables. The calculator obviously does that for you. Then the teacher would say, yeah, but you're not always going to have a calculator. Let me see if she's still alive yet or not.
I do remember that argument all the time.
I think math is now much more usable by more people, and it's going to be the same thing with AI and information.
I mean, calculating all this data without a calculator, I can't even imagine.
But if you go to like Gemini and you say, okay, I've got 142 athletes. There were 7 wrist fractures. Calculate the risk rate, etc. It may need more data than my quick little stem there, but it can do it for you now.
Nice. That's interesting. That's really cool. I didn't even think of having AI try to.
See, I'm telling you how to cheat for my class now that you're done.
Hey, we already took the class. We're good.
Is this not a good time to bring up that after I did my assignment, I used AI to double check that I made the proper conclusions?
Did you really?
I did.
I don't remember that.
I'm completely fine with that.
It's encouraged.
To be congratulated for that.
I was say it's encouraged.
But you still didn't pass.
You mean AI didn't pass?
There you go.
AI didn't pass. Ooh, I can develop an AI program to do this, and we can call it Chad GPT.
Yeah.
You're on to something.
You heard it here first.
Yeah, well, I'm going to retire from this job here and go do that.
Dude, I think we just found our first AI infused athlete training EMR.
Alfie makes a comeback. What's Alfie's last name? It must start with an I.
No, because of IP systems.
There we go.
Yep. IP stood for idiot proof.
That's pretty funny. I like that. Sweet.
So just to wrap things up, we just talked about some data that we've turned into value. Like I think in the episode we talked about like the sign-in sheets, but also, for example, something that I use is my injury report. So like every day I create an injury report or every practice day, I should say, I create an injury report for football. And at the end of the season, the last 2 seasons, I've been able to take those because it's already in an Excel document, and I just put them in a new Excel, and then I'm able to really filter out things and figure out what injuries, what sides of injuries, the positions, and just really like whatever I put into it, like we said in the episode, is really what you get out of it.
Yeah, for sure. I think that, again, that's like I said during the interview, is that's one of the most important things that I teach the athletic training students is like the data you get is only as good as like what you put in, right? So if you're trying to ask a specific question, right, you got to make sure you have the data to kind of help you. Or if you're just thought of that question and you haven't collected that data, now you know where to start and like, oh, well, here's what I'm thinking. Here's how I should collect that data. Yeah,
exactly. So it's a lot more accessible than I think people think.
For sure.
It just takes a minute to get started. And then once you really get started, then you're going to be like, oh, I could look into this. I could look into this. I could look into this.
Just opens a Pandora's box of data.
For real. So if you guys are new here, we do every episode as either interviews like this one. We do other episodes as stories from real life athletic trainers about various topics all around the world. Athletic trainers from all around the world, which is really exciting. And then we also do education episodes, which Randy heads, and those ones are worth Category A CEUs. Thank you so much to Athletic Training Chat and Clinically Pressed. If you're interested in looking at those CEUs, we actually have a sale running. We have some free ones, but we also have a sale running through the end of National Athletic Training Month. So you can use code NATM25 for 25% off those CEUs. There's also still a couple more days of NATM. So because of that, we are still running our giveaway if you're listening to this as it comes out. So enter our giveaway with Medco to win a Merritt Mueller kit and some podcast merch. Super exciting. And then if you're interested in more CEUs, you can also use code ATCorner for $101 off MedBridge. It is a reporting year.
Yes, it is.
So if you guys are interested in sending your stories or just chatting with us, head over to our Instagram at ATCornerPodcast, where you can do a bunch of the things that I already talked about. We also have a bunch more links and stuff down below in the podcast description. So I think that's all my fine print.
Thank you for helping us showcase athletic training behind the tape. Bye.